Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'd like to share my recent conversation with David Carver and Shafeel Rashid. David and Shafeel are two second-year students in our Executive MBA class of 2026, and they are also leaders on the Executive MBA Student Association, or ESA as it's known around these parts. I recently connected with David and Shafeel to talk more about their backgrounds, their decision to pursue an MBA, what led them to Darden, how they got involved with the ESA's plans for the year ahead, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with David Carver and Shafeel Rashid. David, Shafeel, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Hey, Brett. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Shafeel, how's everything? How are you doing?
Doing great, Brett. Fall's finally here. It's at least not as much into the 90s, so this is my perfect weather, or I guess officially from tomorrow. Work's been busy, but the good kind of busy, the kind of busy I wanted it to be. So doing well, dad and school and family and all. So all really well.
And you just had a weekend residency this past weekend.
Yep. We just ended I'm in elective season, so I had classes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday based on the classes I'm taking. So yeah, had a full second OGR for Q7 just coming off of that.
All right. And David, how are you doing?
I'm getting through it. I don't have any room to complain or to talk about how busy things are because this is the first quarter in my entire program that I haven't had final exams as part of finals. And then I'm only taking 2 classes this quarter because I was able to front load or backload some stuff around electives. So while it's still a lot of work, I would actually say that it has been a little bit of a more restful or lenient quarter.
Our listeners are getting some sense of the kind of schedule flexibility that starts to creep in during the elective period where students, depending on how many classes you've taken and where you are in your credit count, you might see folks maybe taking 2 electives. Maybe they have an elective that just meets on Saturday and Sunday, or a couple electives that just meet on Saturday and Sunday, maybe no Friday classes, or they just have class on Friday, and maybe they're doing asynchronous elective. Perhaps they're taking a part-time MBA elective. There's all manner of options. Shafeel, can I ask you what electives you're taking here in Q7?
Yeah, I'm taking 3 electives, digital product management, negotiations, and valuations, which is like effectively finance 3 is how I look at it.
Yeah, a good slate of classes. Valuations, I think, has this reputation of being like one of the harder classes at Darden. Would you say that reputation is well earned?
100%. It is fun. It is, all the topics are very interesting. It's like some of my other quant classes where it takes me a bit to catch up. So soon, finals will be amongst us, and I hope to catch up by then. But it's been great and very interesting. Pedro, the professor, is really, really funny.
And David, you mentioned you're just taking 2 electives. Can you tell us how you managed to just only be taking 2 electives versus, say, Shafeel's 3? You mentioned you've done some scheduling that's allowed you to do this.
Sure. So I had a couple of different tactics for getting to this point. The first was being part of student leadership and one student club has meant that I've been able to engage in a couple of classes for credits either now or near the end of the program that take some of that full credit load off. I've also signed up for a couple of independent studies, which don't have specific class time associated, and I can get done on my own pace. And then I have signed up for a couple of global residencies, which each count as a class. And so I'm able to take that out of the schedule for a normal quarter in terms of classwork.
All right. And you're taking 2 electives this quarter. What electives are you taking?
So like Shafeel, I'm taking digital product management, and I'm also taking entrepreneurship through acquisition with Les Alexander.
All right. All right. And then for folks who are curious, there's typically about 10 electives that are offered in a given executive MBA quarter, but you could also take part-time MBA electives. There are typically 3 or 4 of those. They're more on the part-time MBA schedule, which is the evening weeknight schedule. We also have additional opportunities through asynchronous electives, maybe more of an online class. You see that? You see an independent study. People will do those from time to time. David's earlier point, every additional global residency beyond 1 effectively can count, as an elective. So there's lots of different ways to get to the 60 credits that are currently required for graduation. So let's talk a little bit more about you. David, tell us a little bit more about who you are and your
Sure thing.
background.
So I have been in the cybersecurity industry for a little over 10 years. Prior to that was both a combination of odd jobs and a little bit more in kind of communications and the humanities. And as part of cybersecurity, I've been in particular specialized in cyber threat intelligence, which is taking a look at everything that's happening bad in cyberspace and saying, how should a business or an organization interpret this? And what's the best way to mitigate some of this activity?
All right. How'd you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
It was, I would say, a combination of wanting to get back to some type of graduate program in the last 10 years, and then more narrowly, as I've grown in my current organization into a leadership role, realizing that to get to the next stage, really, something along the lines of middle management into the C-suite, there were a lot of gaps that I recognized I was going to need to cover. And I did the math and said, there are two ways that I can close these gaps. I can try to learn a whole lot individually on my own by myself in practical ways that could be extraordinarily difficult or risky depending on the business. Or I could learn from experts surrounded by capable professionals who've all gone through a number of different things that I haven't done. And I said, the latter sounds like it's probably a better bang for the buck.
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds like a very easy decision. Shafiel, tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, I feel like there have been a number of calls where I've been with David, and David always sets it up really well. And then I kind of follow. I've been in the biotech world for about 10 years. I work at primarily as a consulting firm that specializes in manufacturing pharma compliance for pharma and biotech. And for the past couple years, I've been part of a small startup that we co-founded that also deals with the compliance documentation that exists in that world, trying to find another way to make it a little bit easier to deal with and make our day job easier, but hopefully add value to our clients. And before that, I basically came to the United States in 2010 for my undergrad at Virginia Tech. And prior to that, I lived in Saudi Arabia, and then I'm from Bangladesh earlier on. So that's just kind of a broad overview.
Yeah. How did you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
About maybe 5 years into my career, I was like, I think I want to learn more and grow more. And I figured that on the technical side of things, I was getting great on the job training, and I wanted to get into a graduate program. And I realized that engineering graduate program wouldn't help, especially since I'm not trying to get into academia. And then I realized that most of the gaps that I was wanted to address were more on the business side of things, having a certain perspective and dealing with operations and client management outside of the day to day, the strategic vision. And about 4 years ago, I'm like, do I want to pick that up also like by doing and hitting the walls and trial and error, or if there's a better way? Like David had mentioned before, I was like, okay, if there's a way to just gain all the best practices, and then I started thinking about what would that look like, and then started looking into an MBA program.
Yeah, some themes across your respective stories. Shafiel, how did Darden get on your radar?
I started looking into it a little bit more seriously about, I would say, like 3, 4 years ago, and then I was talking to other people in my circle who, had pursued graduate studies, even if it wasn't business school per se. And then I was just like Googling local MBA programs in the area. And then Darden quickly came up again and again. And then I talked to people who were either directly or indirectly familiar with Darden. And everything I heard, I really, really liked, especially the case method stuck out for me. I'd taken some philosophy. I was a philosophy minor in undergrad, and that was the closest to like some case method, Socratic type classes that I had taken. And I'm like, I can't picture that in a business setting yet, but this sounds like whatever I learned, I would actually stick. So I think that was something that really stuck out for me.
And David, how about for you? What got you interested in Darden?
Well, Shafiel will know that I love a good spreadsheet. So when I knew that I was going to be interested in applying to business schools, I had 4 or 5 that I decided to look at. And because I'm local to the DC area, one of the big factors at the top of that list was, is it something that's going to be a long commute or is it something that's going to be fairly reasonable to get to? And that was one of a number of different factors on the spreadsheet. There was location, there was cost, there was whether it's more lecture based or case study based. There was, where it is in rankings. There were a couple of other features. And what I just found for the schools that I applied to across all of those factors, when you took them in aggregate, Darden was the best pick. Um, and so you'll see as a trend that I like to have a set of data behind the decision where I can just say, well, the data says do this, so you might as well do it. But I also had the opportunity to visit the school at least once prior to making a decision. And what I found was that in talking to the other students and in hearing from professors and in looking at the curriculum, the other schools that I was looking at, I had a sense that it would be a place where I would be comfortable. Darden was a place where I realized I would be challenged. And I thought the way I'm going to get the most out of a program is if I'm being constantly challenged. So that really was what tipped the scale for me.
What is it about the experience or the research that you did that led you to that conclusion that you're going to be challenged here?
Part of it was the just breadth of experience that I saw in the current student body at the time and then the other prospective students who I was talking to. Part of it was looking at um, some of the sample case studies that were available to people prior to making a decision. Some of it was really just getting talking to different people who were involved in different graduate schools and getting a sense of how much work is involved, how much were you pushed, what did the especially the second year of the elective side of things look like. So there were a number of different reasons that altogether made me realize that it would not be punishing by any means, but it would be a place where I'd be stretched across a variety of different disciplines, which is exactly what I was looking for.
So Shafiel, you come to Darden. You're brand new, first year executive MBA student. Obviously, this was a while ago. You're in quarter seven now. You're in the electives period, downhill side of the program. But if you remember back to starting the program, what was that adjustment like for you?
It was interesting. I was like, interesting, easy, hard, all of it comes at the same time. Easy, I would say, because once it started, it just went. Like it just kept on going. Like it was LR1 and we're seeing everyone else for the first time. Went from like, oh, I've seen some faces on Zoom at some other events, pre-admission events, or post-admission events like that. And then it was like, oh, we're in Q1, we have classes. Um, Hard part was just juggling, like getting used to a new rhythm, getting used to studying again in a lecture based format. Very rewarding, very interesting, but it was just a new adjustment. The interesting part for me was like, oh, I didn't realize how much free time I must have had before this. Once I started trying to fit both work and school, and it's like possible. I'm like, somehow you become like a time ninja, fitting it all in. And that had been very interesting because I'd never been this aware of time or this mindful in terms of, okay, work is going to take up this much, and this is school, and this is where friends, family, life, all of that fits in. So that part was very interesting, where, at least for me, how I've looked at it is like, okay, weeks and months are like a set of trade-offs. There's like the amount of learning I want to do, amount of engagement with fellow students, and then there are certain things that come up, like both work-wise, or earlier this January, I got COVID for the first time, and then it's like, oh, when you take a hit at work for a week, and that throws everything off. So it's just been like an interesting set of challenges. But when it's interesting is because, yeah, like sometimes we talk about what it will be like after the program with all these newfound bonus bits of time that we have found. But again, once it starts, it's also the easy part is, you're used to the flow, you have your learning team, you have your classmates, and that all of it just makes it smooth in its own way.
What's been your guide for you as you've kind of had to navigate all these competing priorities? What's helped you figure out where to put your time and attention and energy?
A little bit of journaling and mindfulness to go like, okay, what do I want out of this? And a lot of it is like, okay, these are the kind of experiences I'm getting access to, and this is what I want. So I want to figure out a way to prioritize this. what that looks like from a week or a month basis can mean more time with classes or mean time with more faculty members or other students in the program. So that balance shifts. It's not always necessarily just more time in the classes themselves. And sometimes it is like, oh, hey, this is a topic I really need to brush up on, and I see the direct application right now. So just kind of zooming out and figuring out, like, what would I think about this after the program and 10 years down the line?
Do you feel like you've gotten better at that as you've gone through the program? Like that's gotten easier, or is every quarter kind of its own challenge?
It has gotten easier because I can go like, okay, this is how I've handled it. Part of me did think I would have a handle on it, quote unquote, within like a couple months. It hasn't been that easy. It does need some active thinking on, at least on my end, but definitely gotten used to the rhythm of things now.
And David, how about for you? What you came to Darden, you wanted to be challenged. What was that adjustment like for you as a first year executive MBA student?
Well, there were a couple of weeknights where I said to myself, I am hosed. There is no way that I am getting everything that I need done. And I really took to heart some advice that we were given right at the beginning of the program, I think from the cohort ahead of us, which was if you're not very good at organizing your time now, you will be in a year. And that ended up being the case. And not only has the experience from that first year meant that I have a much, much stronger framework for organizing my time now, but another adjustment was in a way that hadn't happened too often at work up to that point, really being faced every single week with a concept or an assignment that within the first 5 minutes, I would say, I don't know anything about this and I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. And learning to be very comfortable with that sense of insufficiency and ignorance was helpful because if you allow yourself that first couple minutes or hour to say, I just don't know how to go about this, let that feeling wash over you and then say, well, however I feel about it, I need to get done, has been very useful for other challenges that I've since faced across work, my own leisure time or personal life, etc.
And what's been your strategy for figuring out how to balance, work, life, and school, or juggle all these competing priorities?
Well, if anybody on my learning team is listening, they're going to get a kick out of hearing about yet another spreadsheet. But I actually have a set of sheets across work and for outside work where I measure everything by in prioritized columns. Number one, how bad would things break if I just decided not to do this? When is it due? How difficult is it going to be? And how long is it going to take to get done? And I sort of waterfall prioritize each of those at the beginning of the day, and that immediately gives me a sense of here's where I need to spend my time.
And do you feel like that's gotten easier as you've gone through the 6, 7 quarters of the program?
Absolutely has. Yep. A little bit of growing pains at the start, but it is brought so much clarity to how I organize my time now.
Yeah, I'm curious, Shafil, when you think about where you are now versus where you started, you're obviously not done with the program, but what jumps out to you about how you feel about school or what you've learned or how you've grown and developed?
Um, I think I would just say like I think the learning team part of it definitely has become a high. Like I've heard about it, I've heard talked to other people about it before starting the program. I'll just a shout out to you and team Brett, or whoever does the magic behind the scenes. Uh, got really really lucky with my learning team, and it's been a fantastic fit with like five others, and I think that's the thing that jumps out at me because they keep me engaged and sane, especially when certain things are hard, even if just like a constant source to lean on. And all so that relationship has just developed and matured over like a whole year, and I feel really grateful for that because that sticks out a lot for me. I'm in electives. I am taking like what to me is like a harder finance class. I have no finance background at all, and one of my goals was to challenge myself and learn things that I want to learn but I have no familiarity with. So I have learning team member Christopher, like for example, will put in the extra time very casually explaining things that come to him very naturally, but put in that time. So just getting into that collaborative framework, like, oh, not only are there amazing professors who can make even concepts like finance fun, Like the number of jokes we have in finance classes is not something I was expecting from Rich to Pedro, so just the variety of classes, that way learning teams can enhance that experience, like both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom, that improves the whole experience. And other things that jump out are just, I would say, global residencies. Like, I know I've heard about it, and I'm glad I'd listened to some podcast episodes before I started, which is what made me sign up for a second one, even without being a Gemba student, and had a fantastic experience in Germany. And just like how that can, going somewhere with your fellow classmates and a professor and the learnings that are possible, David was one of them, that had been great. And then just some of the other, like both the professors aspect, the program team aspect, all the thought that goes into Darden that we can see, and just the overall student experience. I got to experience almost firsthand one of the things that I believe Ali Torres was on a different podcast episode. I was just looking up MBA programs at Darden, and I'm like 99% sure it was her. And she was talking about how once she came in over here, one of the things she had experienced was like some student talking with an employer where they were like, actually, this is not a good fit for me, but I have a classmate who would be a better fit. So like that level of collaboration of like, people looking out for other students, that is something I've gotten a chance to see firsthand. So all of these things stick out for me. So basically just the different aspects of the people involved.
Yeah, how about for you, David? Here you are, over halfway through the program. When you think about where you are now, how you've grown personally, professionally, what jumps out to you?
One thing probably right at the top is just the understanding of how many different frameworks, both qualitative and quantitative, I can bring to any problem as a result of having gone through all of these different classes. So I've been able, over the course of the program, to put into place things that I've learned in leading organizations with respect to how to deal with employee behavior, how to deal with expectations across the culture and workflow from my team. I've been able to benefit from things I've learned in operations around how to effectively track and have expectations for people's time. As part of decision analysis, I was able to put together a linear regression that helped with understanding trends around um, churn for our services base, and to get an understanding of what was some better ways of thinking through our strategy there. So just purely on the case and the course side of things, I've benefited so much. And then being exposed to so many, I would say, ridiculously competent people as part of the program, both the professors and classmates, means that you gain a very appropriate dose of humility on a regular basis. So every class or conversation that I'm in as a result of the program, I think to myself, what does somebody else know that I don't? And how do I make sure that I am learning as much as possible from that interaction, and being as humble and respectful when I walk into a room or a conversation, because there's just so much talent and expertise that you can't, number one, you can't assume that you know everything, and then number two, um, you want to make sure that where you do know something, you're being as giving as possible. You're sharing what you know, because somebody on the other side could need to benefit from your experience.
Well, thank you both. You're here because you're leaders on the Executive MBA Student Association, and I want to make sure we have some time to talk about the ESA, as it's known. David, tell us a little bit more about what the Executive MBA Student Association is.
Sure. So the ESA is a largely self-governing body within the Executive MBA program, whose primary responsibility is to improve the experience and the resources of the students in the program. Some of that is done by liaising with the official Darden program team. Some of that is done on a purely ad hoc or volunteer basis within the cohort. But it all comes down to making sure that across academics, the search for career, how people are feeling, both in terms of what kinds of social things they have access to. Are they keeping healthy? Do they feel like they're still able to give to each other and to the community? Across so many different dimensions is just making sure that um, the resources and the activity to make things better is being organized and momentum's being kept up with. So it's a great opportunity for service across the students, and it's it's not an insignificant amount of work. So it's certainly been an extra piece to figure into time priority over the last several months.
Shafil, how did you decide that you wanted to get involved with the ESA?
Yeah, I would say the MBA 25s the year before us, they did a good job, I would say, presenting at our LR1. And especially Dylan stuck out. He was at our club fair when we were talking to all the different groups, including the ESA. And I think I'm paraphrasing here, but it kind of stuck. It's like, hey, you get to improve the experience with the people and you get to meet a lot more of your cohort while doing something positive. And I was like, that sounds outside of my comfort zone, but also sounds fantastic. And I think I should do this. And that was how I wanted to get involved. There were some other opportunities pre ESA that David and I were both able to engage with, such as being section reps. We were both in section B, and uh, we signed up to be section reps for section reps. And from that on, during when the ESA election time came around, we spoke and we were like, oh, hey, let's do this together. And here we are.
David, it sounds like you and Shafil made a joint decision, but how did you decide you wanted to get involved with the Executive MBA Student Association?
Well, to Shafil's point, I'd been a section rep before and had raised my hand for that largely because I've always wanted to be as involved as possible in improving the experience for whatever organization I have to be a part of, whether that's academic or corporate. And then I was I was a little bit on the fence on whether I wanted to sign up for ESA, but Shafil actually reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to be on a ticket?" And you can't say no to Shafil, so I said, "Sure," and here we are.
I love that. Shafil, the man that cannot be refused. Can't turn him down. Um, Shafil, tell us about some of the things that ESA has done so far this year, or over the past few months. Lots of different kinds of things I know come out of the ESA, but anything you would want to highlight here for our listeners who are just learning about this student organization?
Yeah, the ESA is just, I would say, involved at various levels, from the day to day. I would say just what is happening at an on grounds residency, during our two on grounds residencies a quarter per month, from setting up social events so that everyone has a touch point to come together. Individual groups and learning teams might have their own routine, but we want to make sure that we highlight a spot for the entire cohorts to come together, even if that is something at the hotel lobby where we do game night, or a local establishment, at a rooftop, or what we did at the end of core was fantastic, that we basically set up a night at the Jefferson Memorial where we went for getting group photos and mark the end of core, and invite a professor, like our marketing professor Luca showed up, and that was fantastic. We also set up a social event in July at one of our other ESA members' houses, and was organized by the ESA. And that was a fantastic event where we just, everyone just showed up on a Sunday to someone's house. And again, we were able to invite our ops to Professor Chris Parker. Again, he's local and he was able to join us. So, I mean, there are things on the social side. On the academic side, it is just setting up study sessions for some of the quant classes and the quarters, just taking figuring out what does that support look like based on what the students are looking for. And then we also set up some career related events. Our career VP, Megan, she helped set up both a recruiter chat session with a principal from her recruiting company, and that was great. That was last week, I believe. And then I would say about a month or two ago, we had an event where she set up like a moderator chat between two other cohort members to talk about their recent job hunt and job searching strategies. So ESA basically tries to meet the students where they're at like, either a social capacity, the academic capacity, networking outreach, and in some ways just, like, hey, what else is going on, and just be there for the students. In terms of, one of the fun things we got a chance to do was write encouragement notes for the new first years. And that was something we participated in this OGR, so that the first years will get to see that their next OGR. It's just a brief snapshot.
Yeah. David, do you have a favorite event the ESA has offered or sponsored thus far, something that stands out to you, or maybe something you're looking forward to that the ESA is doing?
Sure. So as far as events go, the party that Shafiel mentioned that our VP of academics Campbell put on a month or two ago, that has to be that's a highlight. Um, Not just because we got so many people out, but to Shafiel's point, we got so many people out on a Sunday after the OGR was done. OGR being the on grounds residency. In terms of stuff that I'm looking forward to, Shafiel touched really well on a lot of kind of the tactical event items. The other thing that the ESA contributes to a lot is thinking through policy and um, sort of how does the program run, that we interact with the program team for figuring out, like what's working, what's not. And some of those conversations will hopefully lead to some like changes. I don't, nothing that's necessarily broken, but some improvements for the class that's coming ahead of us. That's the one thing that I think, if you're going to be in this position, you have to enjoy is planting trees whose shade you might not enjoy. Is putting together ideas that may not kick in until the next class comes in. But that's something that I am looking forward to. It's a little bit vague, but I think kind of overall, it encapsulates a lot of different things that we're working on.
Well, a couple more questions for you. Shafiel, what are you looking forward to in the months ahead? What do you have circled on your calendar?
Um, Probably the biggest highlight right now is the global consulting project. With a team of two others, Jake and Mike Hurd. And I wanted to say the last name because we have 9 mics in our class. So with Jake and one of 9 mics, we're signed up for a global consulting project in Morocco, that is slated for what's called a J term in January. That, well, actually it occurs over 3 quarters, Q8, 9, and 10, but it also involves visits to be scheduled during J term. So that has been very exciting, working with a nonprofit, or we're about to, but just that prospect has been really exciting. It also means I need to go through my entire course calendar, because that is an additional class in additional 3 classes. And I was at about a projected 67 or 68 credits already, but I'm excited to figure that out. I want to take and learn anything and everything that I can, but I got to figure out a little bit more realistic compromise. I'll be talking to Erin, our advisor, before that. But I think that's probably my highlight that's coming up. In addition to, we have going on global residencies in a couple of weeks right after finals. So I'll actually be going to Morocco for the first time then, and hopefully back during January. So those would be the 2 highlights. And then we also have some ESA-ish events, where we join program with the program team, where we do a holiday party in November. And then we are also going to have a winter prom in January or February. I believe it's January, actually. So just lots of events to go back to, but highlight will be the global consulting project for me.
Yeah, thank you, Shafiel. David, how about for you? What are you looking forward to?
There's a couple things. I'm in the Darden Executive Fund, which is a club that helps maintain a small portion of the portfolio for the Darden Foundation. And that is something that we are going to get started on with our pitches for investments once we finish up a class on security valuations next quarter. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. And then I signed up for global residencies in Argentina, which is coming up in 2 weeks, and then Vietnam, which is coming up in March. And both of those I'm really looking forward to, not only because I've not been to either of those two countries, but also because I'm so excited for another opportunity to hang out with and learn from a bunch of different people in the program, some of whom I know really well already, and then some of whom I'm looking forward to getting to know a little bit better.
Yeah, we tell prospective students all the time, if you find an executive MBA student and they're talking to you about their global residency, they'll either say a couple things. I enjoyed it so much, that I did a second or a third or even maybe fourth, right? And that one tends to be kind of the gateway to wanting to do more. Or something like, I wish I would have been a Gemba student now that I know this experience, and wish if I had to do it all over again, I would have thought through it as the prospective student, realized that I could do this. I could do 4 global residencies. Just the opportunity to go and see and do as much as you can in the program doesn't come up that often, that you get to do these kinds of courses where you get to go visit businesses and sit with senior leaders and really kind of immerse yourself in the business of a country where maybe you haven't spent much time, or maybe you have, but it's a completely fresh look and take on a location that you think you know really well. So, and interesting to hear that from your stories as well, right? Not just one global residency, looking to add more. Shafiel, piece of advice for our listeners, something you would encourage them to keep in mind as they think about their own MBA journeys.
I would say get as involved as you can. Try to, like that could be either ESA or clubs, or, just know that you're like, yes, I'm sure it's going to look very busy. You're taking on school on top of work and life, but, the faculty members are there, the student clubs are there. Like, I would say find something that is, like Darden, but not just the classes. That doesn't have to be at a club level. I would highly encourage that. I have found that very, very rewarding. Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, right? This is hopefully not a transactional experience for people who are coming. It's got to be about something bigger than just getting the degree. I think particularly at a place like Darden, which is case method. Obviously, you talked about learning teams, all this engagement that happens both in and outside the classroom. If you're just looking for an MBA, it's probably, it's probably more than you're asking for there. But the people who come here are interested in a much more holistic experience, right? People want to be engaged in and outside the classroom. So appreciate that insight. David, piece of advice from you for our prospective student listeners.
Sure. This is going to be very closely connected to what Shafiel said, which is you are going to get out what you put in. So if you just want it to be transactional, it'll just be transactional. But if you want to come out with a really killer network of amazing people and you want to have a set of lessons across a bunch of different domains that are immediately applicable to what you're doing, and you're willing to put the work in for that to happen, you will get it out. It's a program that is extraordinarily well run. So as long as you're willing to put in the resources and the time, you'll get so much out of it.
That's great advice. True across all of Darden's formats. There, you get out of what you put into it. David, Shafiel, always great to see you, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your stories with our listeners.
For sure. Thanks for having us, Brett.
Thank you for having us. It's been fantastic.
And that was my conversation with David Carver and Shafiel Rashid, 2 second-year students in our Executive MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.